but just to say hello.
Yeah, of course. So, we're from MAS, and I am Ariana Lebed. I am the director of creative at MAS, and I've worked here for 7 years. And my dream client would be anything and everything related to Formula One.
Oh, nice.
And I am Shane Carey. I am an art director at Moss. I've been here about 4 years, and I would say my dream client is Little Caesars.
And
Because you love pizza?
I love pizza. Yeah, I'm a New Yorker, but I live in Florida, so it's a little hard.
it's true. Every time Shane and I go on site together for a project, you can count on Shane to find the best local pizza spot. So let's talk a little bit about Moss and just who we are before we dive into the rest of our presentation. The North Star that we have at Moss is we really are all about evoking emotion by daring to be bold. And what does that mean? So, in a nutshell, we're a team of creatives, technologists, producers, account people, and we work on everything, soup to nuts, from the initial idea all the way to the final execution, and trying to bring just incredible ideas to life for our clients. And what is so great about experiential, and honestly, why I think, like, despite the crazy timelines and everything, what keeps us coming back for more is because we do a lot. Experiential is a ginormous umbrella for basically anything from interactive experiences to pop ups to partner summits to content production, to giant gumball machines to little pop ups to just basically everything. If you can experience it, we probably do it or have done it. And just every day brings a new project and a new challenge for us. So that's why we really, really love it. Um, so just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to walk you first through the brief to concept journey. So a little bit more about like how we come up with our ideas. And then I'm going to hand it over to Shane to talk about more of that design to build process and how we bring those ideas to life. And then I'll show you a few case studies so you can see it in action. And then also a few pro tips because we got access to your brief. So just some suggestions to consider as you go about answering, and then just ending on the residency program before we open it up for questions. So with that, let's dive into the first half of our process. So really it's about taking the client's brief and turning it into tangible creative concepts. And we break this journey down into four main stages. So understand, ideate, test, and implement. And if we look a little bit deeper here, this is really the roadmap that we follow. It starts with understanding the challenge, understanding what the brief is asking us for, then exploring ideas, refining them, and then finally putting them down on paper to really sell them. And really, this last part over here on the far right is sometimes really where you'll see Shane and I overlap a little bit in our journeys. But I'll dive into each one of these specific sections in a little bit more detail in just 1 minute. So the first thing I want to do though is there is a really important caveat, and that is that although we're showing you a linear journey here, it's really not a linear process. It's more of actually a practice. And the best way to think about it is it's like a toolbox. So for any given project, you're going to need to pull different tools out. And so it's more of just this framework where you should be just pulling it from depending on the situation. And what I mean by that is you may do like kind of the first phase and then like jump to the third phase or fourth phase. It really depends on like timeline and what team you have and things like that. But what I'd like for you to walk away from this presentation with is just more of a basic understanding of what each step's value is so that you understand when I want to tap into that step, and when I can, bring it into my workflow. And then also because sometimes you go backwards and then forwards again, and you kind of jump around. So don't think of it so much as a very defined linear type of process. We can move forward and backwards, and we can jump between them. So with that being said, let's dive in a little bit more specifically. So the first thing we do is bring the team together. And by that, great ideas come from collaboration. And there's sort of the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is you're able to choose your team and bring in people who you think would be a great fit for the brief. Maybe like if Shane is doing a brief for Little Caesars, he will bring in other pizza lovers into that brief. If I'm doing something for Coachella, I'm going to bring in other people who really enjoy music and have been to other festivals into the brief as well to like help help me, come up with things and ideate. And it would be really great, because they'd be a really good fit. So that's like best case scenario. The other thing that you can do is like sometimes what we do is maybe I want to bring these people in, but they don't have time to be on the entire RFP or the project. I'll just bring them in for some initial thinking or initial brainstorming, or maybe I'll just have a call with them to bounce ideas off of them. So you can bring people in just for certain phases, which is totally okay too. But honestly, sometimes the reality is you either have to go at it with an assigned team or a very tight, small team, or even alone. And that's totally fine. That's actually a great time to also lean into AI, because AI is just like a great partner that we use to bounce ideas off of and sort of gut check our thinking and things like that. So it's not always necessarily an incredible detriment. But the key really here is to try and bring people in with diverse backgrounds and perspectives to get that best thinking, because our audiences are always multifaceted and we should be reflecting that when we're approaching our ideation. So the second part is really, really critical. And this is our research phase, which I think is the phase that you guys are in right now. And this is the goal where you want to become an expert on the brand, an expert on the audience, an expert on the culture, an expert on the brief, basically an expert on anything and everything that has to do with the challenge. Because the reason why this is really important is this is going to be the foundation for all your thinking. This is what all your thinking is going to be built on, but it also gives you that confidence in choosing the directions you choose. It even gives you confidence when it comes down to presenting your ideas, because you've done the research, you feel like you totally understand the brand and you can speak from a place of expertise rather than feeling like you're kind of just guessing as you're going along. A lot of this sort of looks like we read everything. We reread the brief over and over again. We stalk the social media presence of the brand, all the ways in which they show up. We do a lot of landscape research, so we'll look at what their competitors are doing. We'll look at how they interact with their audience, their primary audience, their fandoms, things like that. Really go down those rabbit holes. Another thing that we do that I find that people don't value enough is a lot of brands have like blogs, and those are usually like buried on the website. But those are a great place to mine their company visioning or the CEO's thinking, or just what they're currently sort of working on. It's really helpful. We've also listened to like podcasts where the CEO goes on and speaks. But we basically become a super sponge for all the information. And it's really, really helpful. It's also really great to sort of try and organize all of this in a place where you can go back and refer to it, but also like other team members can go back and sort of mine it for helpful things. So basically, the goal is to just become the really annoying know-it-all expert in the room. That's definitely the best case scenario. So the next step here is framing the opportunity, and this is really critical. It's sort of after you finish the research, it's really like it's easy to just say, okay, I'm ready to start ideating. But before you do that, we force ourselves to pause and we comb through the brief plus our research and write a more specific and more inspiring ask for ourselves. We like to think sometimes like, how can we best shine and where can we really bring our special sauce to the brief? So what this looks like a little bit is, you can see some examples here. So we translated what the client gave us into something that feels a little bit more powerful, like a creative mission for us to tackle. And it's really just like about reading between the lines plus adding a little bit of the context that we've done from the research. So I'll give you an example, like the middle one where they're like, oh, design our third year of our unique conference for this many people and leave a lasting impression. But when I read that, I think, okay, these people have been to this conference for 3 years. And they want it to be memorable. How can we stand out amongst all the other conferences? So how can we reimagine this as something that feels less B2B and maybe more B2C, and where every touch point feels unexpected, engaging, and it's designed to be unforgettable. So this is what we mean by something like when we're given the briefs, they can be written in very sort of dry, very business, straightforward language, but then we sort of reframe it, obviously keeping the core ask intact. And this becomes then our North Star. And it really sets us up for success because then we're all aligned on what we want to tackle and react and ideate against. And then now we're ready to sort of begin that really fun phase, which is that brainstorm and that ideation period. So now it's just like ready to unleash everything. It's all about thinking big and really exploring. So we're aligned on our challenge and we're aligned on what we want to tackle. It's time to sort of really just like let our minds wander and think of all the possible solutions, big, small, weird, you name it. It's all fair game. I always also think it's important to take the extra step and put the ideas through the brand lens. So a really kind of dumb example is like instead of saying or putting in a brainstorm, oh, I think this should be a roller rink. It's sort of like, why? Why do you think of this should be a roller rink? Well, instead, maybe it's a roller rink in the shape of like their logo and it only plays love songs because based on my research and the brief and the brand X, Y, and Z, you know? So it's like take that extra step when you're thinking about ideas and sort of also put it through the lens of the brand and like, why is this a good idea rather than just sort of doing a shotgun approach of random things. That'll be kind of really helpful when you're some different ways in which I think people show up, which is super interesting, is they they add ideas in or imagery from Pinterest, they add gifs from TikTok. They just pull from a lot of different places. They can wireframe user journeys. If you go to the next slide, Shane, it's just an example board of how we work at MAS. This is sort of our typical brainstorm. We work in FigJam, which and everybody just dumps in a lot of ideas. And so this is like the no bad idea stage. And it's just super, super fun. So like you can see here, a lot of different ways in which people choose to sort of express what their ideas are. And if you go to the next slide, sort of in order to like ensure that we're bringing fresh ideas to the table, I think it's really just important to, again, push yourself to think from different angles, pull inspiration from different industries. You don't always have to pull inspiration from experiential marketing or advertising. You can look at art, you can look at hospitality, you can look from different angles. But really consider sort of what a radical and different approach would be. The goal is to just not look like something that's been done before or feels super expected. Then the next one is really, okay, we have this mountain of ideas that you saw, like the brainstorm board. It's about culling and refining now. So basically, this is always the hardest phase, but it's honestly the most important one because we have all these ideas, but we have to start to poke holes in them and really start to pull apart which are the strongest, which fit that like North Star question that we're asking, challenge that we're asking ourselves. That we outlined earlier. And so we just want to make sure that like what we develop is something that is really clear and really exciting. And you can see if on this chart, it sort of falls right between sort of something that feels really simple, but not incredibly boring, feels new and fresh. So to hit this goal, we ask ourselves sort of like a series of questions that are really helpful. So like, does this idea really align best with the brand's vision and aesthetic? Does it feel like it has the ability to be incredibly cohesive from end to end? You know, have you considered maybe running this idea by somebody who knows nothing about the brief and see if it makes sense to them? So these are just some example questions. And at this phase is where we're really, you know, kicking off the constant editing cycle. You know, once you get to this part, you're not sort of just editing once. You're constantly looking at everything that you're doing, and you're sort of picking it apart and poking holes, because we want to make sure that we're proposing something that feels like really clear, perfectly aligned. And honestly, if it feels effortless, then I think we've hit the mark. And then last but not least, we implement it. So that means sort of putting the pen to paper. And like I said, this is somewhere where kind of Shane and I overlap a little bit. And sort of by that I mean, we sort of develop the chosen idea into something that feels like a really clear, compelling story, usually moving into deck format. And as I mentioned before, like we want to make sure that it's incredibly cohesive. So we sometimes start with wireframing a step-by-step user journey, and having everybody aligned. So it's like basically like what is happening, what is the first thing that people are doing? Are they getting in a queue? Are they seeing a big graphic outside? Are we actually sending them an email before they even come? All the way down to like, what is the last thing they do before they exit our experience? Are we doing anything as a follow up? All that good stuff. We sort of wireframe that out, and make sure that we're all aligned to it. And then developing the idea with some supporting visuals. And these can be things like mood boards, AI concept development, things like that. Shane will get into that a little bit more. But basically, I have two important notes. One is if you notice that you're having to provide a lot of explanatory text on slides, your idea might be too complex. It's kind of like a red flag. It's worth refining your idea more if it's basically you feel like you're having to over explain it in order for somebody to get it. And then the second point is just consistently stepping back just to look at that cohesive thinking from top to bottom as you're looking at your pitch deck. And so that's it for me. So to really, if you go to the next slide, Shane, we're gonna just talk about how we go through, you know what I mean, signed off concept into real life build. So now I'm gonna pass it to you, Shane.
Sweet. Thank you, Ari. Hold on one second. So once we have a concept that everyone is excited about, we have to actually design and build it, and that's kind of where this journey begins. So we broke it down into four phases, each one being a major milestone for the project. And as we dive in a little bit deeper, phase one is that design alignment, then comes design development, final design sign off, and the build and install. We'll dive more into what happens in the following pages. So, but I first want to note that there's a lot of parallel pathing happening during these phases, which is where a lot of our like cross departments kind of like work in collaboration. And an example of this is we can't wait until design sign off to start getting pricing from vendors. We usually have to start like right there and then. Another example is we need to consider how to fold in any tech during the design phase so it doesn't feel like an afterthought, which happens a lot because tech is always changing. Like there's always a new screen that's coming out every week, especially with like the advancements that we have today. So, kicking off phase one with aligning on the design vision. And what this looks like, this is all about making sure we and the client are perfectly aligned on the vision before we start really digging into the design. We use things like mood boards, reference imagery to establish the overall vibe, look, and feel. This helps get everyone on the same page before we are far down the line, and that happens all the time that sometimes we're not on the same page. So going back to these images and references are always a pinpoint in a project. So phase two is all about shaping and developing the design vision. We move from reference imagery into sketches and more concentrated designs. We begin to show how our approach to materiality, color, and branding can come to life. All along the way, we're in constant communication with production, asking the important questions. Is it in budget? Do we have time to make it? Does it actually make sense? Keeping in lockstep with them is key to success on any project. So phase three is final sign off, where in order to get the green light for the client, we need to polish the design so they get excited and say yes. And if you're not excited as well, I don't think your client's gonna be that excited either. But for the clients, we create final detailed renders that show exactly what the experience will look like in the space. We did our jobs if these look exactly like renders, but IRL when we get on site. For our fabrication partners, we show views with callouts and all the important details so that they understand our vision and know exactly what we want built.
Shane, what type of tools are you using at that point?
Oh, there's such an array nowadays. I'm using SketchUp to ChatGPT to Gemini to Google Studio to Photoshop to Illustrator to Twinmotion. There's a bunch of different avenues you can go down.
Great.
Yeah. And finally, the most important, like the most exciting part, which this is a recent project I'm going to show you all, is production, build, install of the design. This is where the vision becomes reality. We are finalizing material samples, look at in progress build photos, doing shop visits, and making an on-site deck to set us up for success for loading. Once on site, the creative team is overseeing all the builds, making any final adjustments, styling, and providing any final feedback on things like lighting and attendee flow. Then all that's left is to open the doors and release the design out into the wild and watch how people interact with the experience. This design that y'all see here was probably the craziest turnaround time that I've done and probably Ari has seen me done. I basically submitted this design on a Friday and then I flew out to Rahid in Saudi Arabia on Sunday and walked into my design being built on Monday. So when I talk about very like comms with your production partners are very important. Within 3 days, they were already building this booth. So by that Saturday, it was already done, which is crazy to submit what was a rendering. And then you can see that image on the right. That's the reality of what it became. So going into it, one last note to keep in mind is ideating and designing are best iterative practices. It's just a great quote to live by. And then we move into creativity isn't a straight line. You will never nail anything on the first try. You're constantly getting feedback and making adjustments. The key is to lean in and trust the process, using each round of feedback as a chance to make the work even better. And with that, let's look at some of our real world examples.
Thanks, Shane. I'm hoping you guys can all still hear me. So now that you know our process, we're gonna look at a few case studies of how it all comes together in the real world. Because of the brief that we know that you guys are working on, we only pulled some specifics from our gaming and esports portfolio. And we're gonna start off with a little sizzle that shared all the work we did last year for our clients at Kadia Gaming. Okay, so one of the projects you saw was for Kadia PAX East. This was the goal here was we barely had any information on the brand, what kind of games they're putting out. We had very limited. We just knew we had like four interactive types of zones that we should be, or thematics that we should be building around. And so knowing that, we built like these four huge interactive digital medallions that represented each one of those. It was like space, cyberpunk, a high fantasy theme. And basically, players got RFID bands and they powered them up at a plinth, and then they would tap them at a medallion to have the sort of like content change and reveal something with the medallion. But then they would come back at the end of the day and also tap their RFID band again to see if they were one of the randomly chosen players to win like this huge epic reward. And we would have lines around the booth at the end of every day, people coming back. The other thing that we note that was like really cool was people would leverage our medallions as backdrops to create social content for their cosplay, which was awesome. Then at the next one, at Tokyo Game Show, this was all about really highlighting their cyberpunk world. And the way that we kind of tied in gamification here was we had a bunch of different ways that players could get cheat codes throughout the space. We had them hidden within the architecture itself. They could get it from our truck. They could get it by at a claw machine. They could interact with this robot you see in the upper right hand corner that would say whether or not you're worthy enough to get another cheat code. So they would gather all their cheat codes and then they would go to this central tree. And they would then try and hack into the system through these touchscreen kiosks with their cheat codes, kind of trying to help them. And if they made it through, then they got a reward. Otherwise, they would have to keep trying. And then the last example I have from Kadia is just I wanted to show something that is slightly was a lower budget project that we did for them at DreamHack. We just had this sort of small booth that we called the Supply Drop Hub, where attendees could get supplies to hack their DreamHack experience. But really, the main event was like this was just a central hub for a larger scavenger hunt where players had to find our brand ambassadors that were roving across the entire show floor carrying smaller supply drops. And if you found one, you won a bigger prize. What was really cool though is in order to help guide people towards like when we were releasing our brand ambassadors and what they're wearing and where they are, we released all those clues through Discord. And so people would be on Discord and they would be try to figure out and collaborating as a community there to try and guide people to go and find them. And then the last project just wanted to bring up because I know you guys are working on stuff for Alienware. Um, we do digital experiences as well. So for Alienware, we created a microsite to launch a bunch of new products and peripherals for them. So this was like a 4 week experience where each week we drop new rewards and people could revisit and unlock things like Snap AR lenses and things like that, and other sort of like cool, fun hidden Easter eggs. And also the website had a game mechanic where you would have to click on certain items in a certain order to unlock stuff, and so that also progressed week after week. But this was pretty closely tied to the Alienware Arena site as well in terms of when we were kind of working across the entire Alienware ecosystem. So just to wrap it up, we wanted to just leave you again with a few pro tips that are worth considering as you develop sort of the concepts for your brief. And these are the just things that we've gleaned from our experience doing work for gaming and esports. So one is to really show up authentically. Gamers, they can spot cringe, they can spot desperation in brands really fast. So it's really important to just be real, very real and relevant to your audience. The second one is really simple, but it's really easy to kind of mess this up. Gamers just want a game. They want to get to that gaming and they just want a game. They don't really want a long opening sort of explanation for things. They're competitive at heart. They want to win stuff. So that is really how you're going to win their hearts and minds. The next one is like just really celebrating and building fandom. So folding in the larger culture and lifestyle that gamers love into the experience. Again, that sort of ties back to authenticity. And the last one is just leveraging influencers. We leverage them in a lot of our experiences. They really help sort of hype up what is happening, and we can extend the message across their fan bases. So the last point before I get to questions is just the MAS residency. I just want to quickly touch upon it. So since you're all students here, we wanted to mention that we do have a residency program. It's a 20-week program where you get to have, you truly get hands-on experience in the experiential industry. You get to work on real projects. And so we look for people in creative production strategy and more. Basically, applications will tentatively open October 26th. And if you just go to the next slide, you can find us on social, on Instagram and LinkedIn at Experience Moss, and that's our website. And so you can just sort of follow along there. More information will be dropped as we get into October. So just keep an eye out if you're interested. So with that, I would love to just open the floor to questions.
Okay, I have a question. So you had said that you leverage influencers a great deal within these actual exhibits. How would you actually be using influencers to engage with the audience, or would you use them to engage with themselves, like kind of like a competition, like an esports tournament, or would they be interacting with the clientele themselves?
So we've actually done a lot of
And do you want to turn off the slides so we can see y'all's faces?
yeah, sure, Shane, you can stop screen sharing. So we've done I'm scared to turn my camera on. I don't want to become, I'm sorry guys, I just
No worries, no worries.
so basically what's really, we've done it in a variety of ways. One way that we've done it was we basically have an almost always on gaming station for them, where they come and they basically stream from that station. And then we have a couple, during the day, because we obviously don't want a streamer just sitting there all day, the same one. So we'll have like maybe a morning one and an afternoon, two different streamers. And then they'll like stream through Twitch as well. So we're tapping into their larger digital audience. And then sometimes we'll also host meet and greets while they're there. That was one way. Another way that we did it when we were at Evo, so that's your fighting game tournaments and things like that, that audience. What we did there is we hosted head-to-head matches against two different competitors, and we tried to create like sort of like you can't miss it, you had to be there moments, these two legends going head to get head against each other. And so it became very much like a spectator type of situation. We did also meet and greets where it was like meet your favorite legends of the fighting game community. But then what we did, which was really cool, is we did a beta pro. So this was like the lines for this, like you had to line up like hours in advance to even be sort of like able to fit into the 1 hour block. But basically, we would have just amateurs going up against these pros in matches. And it was just super exciting to watch because like 1 to 2 would actually beat the pro, and it became like this really epic moment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Introduce yourselves to y'all.
Hi, my name is Ariel. My question was more when targeting the gaming community, we started our research kind of looking at individual gamers, but at least in my group, we've kind of been noticing that when talking to gamers, it might be better to target multiple types. So think of like RPG or first person shooters as a whole. What is your advice when it comes to gaming activations? Is it better to be specific or be general?
That's a great question because we luckily, honestly, we had the benefit of basically where we popped up, the audience there was slightly more specific than the general audience. So like when we were at DreamHack, that's mostly like in a first person shooter audience versus like I said, when we were at Evo, that's like a little bit more of a different kind of audience in terms of mostly doing like the fighting game community. What I would say is first, I think you have to just also come from a place of you're not going to please everybody. Like it's impossible to please everybody. So you'll start to probably create an experience that almost feels too generalized. So what I would do is focus down a little bit more on trying not to tackle too many audiences at once. I just think it's going to be really hard because the community is so vast and each audience is very different from one another, from just culturally, but even like what's so crazy was even the soundtrack, the ambient soundtracks that we were playing for each one of our booths was so vastly different based on what we learned from what the kind of music the audiences listen to. So my suggestion to you is like kind of meet you in the middle. Don't try and be general to every single type of community out there, but also don't say, okay, we're just going to focus on first person shooters. Try and just create a little bit more of a narrowed experience. Maybe try and figure out a way in which it's like a not a choose your own adventure, but it's a way that like, okay, if I'm more of a first person shooter, maybe I behave in the experience this way if I like those kinds of games versus maybe if I'm more of that like massive online player game, I behave a little bit more this way. Just because I think you'll start to lose your mind, honestly, with the sheer amount of different types of audiences. So that's sort of my suggestion to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Jude,
Yeah, hi, I'm Jude Wilson. I think
can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah, just
Okay,
fine.
great.
I think this question might be directed a little bit more at Shane. I suppose yeah, you talked a lot about like communication with like client and understand like client stuff and audience, but I'm also a little bit I'm kind of interested in how that influences more of the like I guess technical kind of design, like talk about like like making actual like builds of stuff and things that are then like translated into the actual thing, like the actual art design of it. I guess how do you kind of incorporate that in like a more of like a technical artistic way?
So if I'm understanding that question correctly, are you asking like how we kind of integrate tech into the work or?
Well, I'm talking more like when making like the actual like renders and stuff, like the detailed renders and like views with colors and stuff. I guess like how does it sort of like influence it with like the research you've done and connections they have?
Oh, so like how like I basically keep pulling like a design out of thin air and like 3D modeling it and like running with it basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy. Like I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy, but it's probably the best part ever because you're basically taking those inspiration images and pulling kind of unique, I would say architectural moments from them, and then like mashing them with other moments that the client has kind of vocal that they like want massive screens, but like massive screens on a stage is just boring. But like, can you like break them up in like scenic pieces and stuff like that? So it's kind of a complicated question. It's like you kind of have to be in the client's shoes and understand the taste that they're looking for, and also just looking at their brand and their aesthetics and trying to keep that in mind and not become like too pigeonholed in your own ideas of what you think looks good. You have to really think of like the audience and then also do your research of like other tech events that happen and like their previous years of events where they popped up and how you can just like kind of evolutionize their design almost. I don't know if that's the right answer, but hopefully that's an answer.
But Shane, you also have some guardrails from the client, like you at least have like a footprint that you're working within, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's always the case. So if it's like a 50 by 50 footprint, I think that's what y'all are working in. It's always starting with like kind of a spatial bubble diagram and then kind of like what I do right away is I jump right into 3D and I start just like modeling shapes out and seeing if that's like on brand. It does it go off like the inspo images that I've shown and I got like I sold the client on, because you just don't want to like kind of start modeling and then ignore the dream and the vision that you sold the client on. But you are also restricted in space. So like maybe you showed an image of something so large and big, but like that large and big object can't fit in your space. But how can you bring it to the next level to fit in your footprint?
Leah.
Hi, I'm Aaliyah. So for our group, this is kind of going back to the last question. We are focused on massively multiplayer online gamers, and I recently had an interview and he was talking about how that's kind of not really common anymore, that type of gaming setup, because it's so time consuming, that not much of today's youth does play that. Do you feel like it would be pretty risky for us to try and like focus on that? Because I mean, I'm someone that likes to focus on community, and I love how that one specifically does focus on community, but also I know with something like this, like an immersive experience, it can be like a in and out type of thing. Do you feel like it would be kind of risky for us to continue on with this, or maybe there's a different way we could pivot it into something that could be shorter, or?
I actually disagree with what your interviewer said. Because look at Minecraft, look at Fortnite. Those are humongous, you know what I mean? And what's really an interesting, super interesting insight, because we've been doing a lot of work in the Middle East, is like the people in areas where they feel slightly more disconnected from the global world, they use Fortnite and Minecraft, etc., to like connect globally. Yeah, Roblox, they use those things to connect globally with the world. It's really important to them. They love it. It's like how they can sort of like express themselves when they potentially can't travel. So I think you're seeing this younger generation use those means to connect, and then you're even seeing it backed by brands who build experiences in these digital twin worlds. I think there's a lot of like I think it's kind of a generational divide. That's I think what you're sort of seeing. I think like there's this younger generation who is interested in having a digital twin of themselves and are interested in a digital community and interfacing in that world. I don't mean to get like too deep into it, but like it's a form of also escapism and community building, because like sometimes obviously this world is not great and sometimes it's a bummer. And so I think like it's a great way for them to go ahead and just dive into this other experience. So I think I'm totally still for this idea of like I think those types of games are gonna have staying power for a long time for sure. I mean, you even look at like Animal Farm. At the lowest point here, Animal Farm. That was an amazing. Even look at how successful still to this day Pokemon Go is. Like, you know, so these are still going to they're going to have staying power. People still want to interact there. So I don't think you should have any concerns.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ha.
Sorry.
My name's Kat, and I was just gonna ask, when it comes to like building out an experience while still trying to keep it simple and focusing on like gamers want a game and getting the product out there for people to try, how do you still keep it like new and entertaining while maintaining that simple aspect? Like, does it have to come down to like details or like location-based stuff? What makes it stand out from other events that are happening all the time?
I'll give you my answer, and then Shane, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts. But to me, I think it's just trying to be unexpected during moments. Like there's obviously moments where like if we're talking about Alienware, there's most likely a moment where somebody's going to sit down behind a PC and they're going to game, right? So like that's a given, but everything around that doesn't have to be expected to a certain extent. You know what I mean? Like how they get there, how you choose to tell your story, and what they experience. Also, the other thing I think that is really makes a difference is making people feel like they have agency in their experience. So I think it makes it feel more unique to them. And it makes it feel like I'm not going through something that is literally the same for everybody else. So how can we create a moment where somebody can build their own avatar, express themselves in their unique way, customize merch, walk away with something that feels unique to them. I think that that also feels, people feel like that feels fresh in an experience to them because they got to play a hand within that experience versus it just being, something that feels cookie cutter for everybody. Shane, what do you think?
I think the perfect example that like what we've done, and it's going back to the Evo Vegas, where it's like first person combat fighting, and we did Beat a Pro. So it's like literally we had lines around the booth of people literally just trying to beat a pro. And if they beat a pro, like the whole booth lit up. But at the end of the day, it was just about first combat fighting, but we up leveled it with bringing in these like influencers and kind of like making it more fun and engaging and like pushing that like experience. So it's just stepping back and like looking at like say like a game from like an overview of like how can you just make it more of an experience. And we did that by just bringing in literally pros, and it was insane to watch kids and adults beat these people, and it was kind of an amazing experience. So if you can find something that's like kind of special, it makes the experience more up leveled.
Yeah, to Shane's point, I think if there's that opportunity for programming, because I think like you can have basically like a booth that has a sort of ambient mode or an experience that has an ambient mode, but you can add little tentpole moments to that experience by folding in some programming where you're doing meet and greets, or you're bringing in influencers, or you're doing some sort of talks or demos, or you're running a live podcast. I mean, there's so many ways that you can do something to sort of make it feel like it has these like kind of higher energy moments to help kind of, like keep it fresh and interesting.
Okay, I think we have time for two more questions. Harry.
Hi, my name's Harry. So for our client brief, we have a budget of 50 to 100,000. I'm wondering how you would like make like rough estimates of how much each item you're gonna put in the final activation, just to make sure you're within budget.
So luckily Shane and I'll be really honest with you, and then I'll tell you what I would do if you weren't in my situation. Shane and I have a production team for that. So like Shane showed, there's a lot of parallel pathing that happens in design. So what we're doing is we're doing some initial designs, we're creating some initial like digital touch points and things like that, and and putting some rough scale to things, and then basically production is helping parallel path costs with us. So that's where we're going to scenic vendors, and they're taking a look at things and giving us like real rough estimates. But to your point, because you guys are tighter on budget, I think rather than thinking, okay, let me just try and figure out what the cost of everything is, my two suggestions to you is one, prioritize. Not everything, like an experience where money was spread evenly across the entire experience are not as good as experiences where you invested in key moments, and that's where the dollars were spent and they have a higher impact to them. So that's the first thing I would do, is prioritize your user journey to say, okay, I want to start with a wow moment and I'm going to really invest in that. And then the second place I really want to invest in is this other area, or a lounge, and then everything else becomes a slightly lower investment. The other thing is there's a lot of bang for your buck, and Shane can sort of speak more to this, but there's bang for your buck materials and ways in which you can create wow on a budget. One of that way is like super graphics. If you look at gaming and esports events, you look at Gamescom Cologne, it's amazing to be there and you look at all the booths and everything, but at the end of the day, the booth is just what we call SEG, which is a type of system with super graphics. And they're really impactful because they're huge and they're super big and it's crazy. And then maybe they create like a cool little sculptural moment from the game. But really, the graphics just have insane, immense impact. And then maybe they just really heavily invest in one super great LED screen where they're like pumping it with super sexy content. So it's really just like there's some building systems. Like, I don't know, do you want to talk, Shane, about I always forget.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say if y'all are on a budget, definitely look into SEG. One of our biggest like partners that we work with is MOS, MOSS, where they have a bunch of off-the-shelf systems and stuff like that, and you can do I think up to like 100-foot run of SEG, basically. You can go, I think, 10 feet high is your max, and then whatever. And you can do frames in any kind of formation or size. Like they did like I'm gonna say this wrong, the MLB baseball mascot. Like they literally built that and like framed it all and everything like that. Another system to look at is called 80/20, which is like a speed rail system. That is also a very like it seems cheap, but it's also like you can make some really sick stuff out of it. There was a whole Nike store built out of 80/20, but there's all different materials that you can go down. But to what Ari was saying, like a lot of these events are just giant, beautiful graphics and just giant runs. And so definitely look into just having like prints and everything make up your kind of space.
Great. I think we have time for one question, but we've got to definitely wrap at 10:45. So Diego, last question. You started us, you can bring us home.
Okay, hi, my name is Diego. Sorry for not introducing myself earlier. I first wanted to start off by saying, Shane, your background is absolutely amazing. I absolutely love the aesthetic. And yeah, sorry, I love the the lighting and all the plants. So
Thanks.
I asked before we were talking about pro tips, you all were mentioning that we can actually use the celebration of fandom and communities within, let's say, like an actual game or like a Alienware arena. How can we actually use those fandoms to create more interactions? Like let's say within a game, I was thinking maybe we play Marvel Rivals within our like exhibit. And I know there's Marvel Rivals Discord. Should that like be streamed within the Discord, or like how can we create more interactions based on like what games or people we're using?
So the one thing, my one call out is I would just be careful to not make the experience like the one thing you don't want to happen is make the experience too competitive and negative. Like we don't want anything to kind of like become in that sort of sense. But however, ways in I think you can bring these different kind of like communities to life within a larger community is like one, you can I think host meetups or things like that. So like-minded individuals can come into the space at the same time. Maybe their favorite influencer could be there too. But two, I think is just letting them express themselves. So if there's this moment where this community can express themselves in this certain way in the space, or you have merch customized so that they walk away with like your experience X their group, their faction would be sick because then it just feels a little bit more tailored to them. You know what I mean? I think you could definitely host like head-to-head battles between them. I would just make sure that it always feels obviously like friendly and feels, community building rather than something that feels more like pouring gasoline on a rivalry. But I think that there are just ways in which you can think about how they can kind of feel like it feels special or a moment that is owned by them. I think could be a way in which you could sort of celebrate that community and that fandom, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, Ariana and Shane, thank you so much for your time. Can we give them a round of applause? Big thanks. We really appreciate your time. I think everybody got a lot out of this, and they're all shaking their heads, yes, and definitely inspired them for moving into the design phase of their Alienware project. So appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Sorry again
Thank
for the
you.
Wi-Fi. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
No worries.
Bye.
Bye. See you later.